There were 10 large sorting pins connected by stout gates and with a 20-ton platform scale at the center. Although Bob Wilson was an expert judge of livestock and its value, he failed as a drover because he soon earned a reputation for being tricky in his dealing and careless with the truth. There was, however, no doubt that he knew how to fatten cattle and hogs as well as any man in Kansas, so in the summer of 1919, Bones financed his going into the feeding business. Although woefully short on experience, I started dabbling in livestock buying and shipping just before the end of the wheat hauling season that fall. Soon afterward, I worked out an arrangement with Bones for buying stock that was mortgaged to his bank. He gave me a list showing the percentage of equity each borrower had in his livestock, and I agreed to pay the farmer his equity in cash, to assume the mortgage balance, and to pay it off with interest at 10% per annum when I shipped the stock to market. I had met Bob Wilson several times, but we had had no business dealings, and I was never on his place until October 1919. I was then hauling corn to the Cedar Bluffs elevator for an absentee divide landlord for whom Bones was agent, and stopped in at the bank to ask where I should deliver the nubbins.
"Deliver 'em to Bob Wilson," Bones told me, "and bring me a signed duplicate of the weight slip."
Bob, with 2 hired men, was weighing cattle when I drove into his dooryard. I called to him that I had brought a load of nubbin corn from the Knapp place at Bones Kennedy's orders.
"Unloaded on one of them piles,"
he called back, motioning toward 6 long corn piles outside the far end of the feed lot. To reach them, I had to drive past an equal number of the worst-looking haystacks imaginable. There was a 10-foot border of trampled hay around each one, and several steers were feeding at them. The corn piles were even worse. Hogs were rooting in them, the borders were wider, and countless wagons had been driven over them in getting close enough to the piles for unloading. I drove onto one of the borders and had scooped off 12 shovelfuls when I heard Bob shouting, "Doggone ya, Betty May! You keep away from that feed lot. One of them old sows will chomp you up like a roasting deer. Now you go play with Arvis." The shout had been loud, but lacked any conviction that it would be obeyed. I had the corn nearly unloaded when a little voice that sounded as if it came from under the horses called, "Hi, man." I looked over the wagon side and saw a chubby, red-cheeked little girl standing less than a foot from the lightning-fast heels of my off Mustang, looking up at me with big, deep blue eyes. Afraid to make a quick move that might startle the horse, I climbed slowly down over the wheel and picked the little girl up. She snuggled against my shoulder as if she'd known me all of her life, and when I asked her name, she told me,
"Betty May Wilson, 3 years old. What's your name?"
"Ralph," I told her, "but they call me Bud round here." She snuggled closer and told me,
"I like you 'bout."
From that moment, I was hooked. I told Betty May I liked her, too, set her up on the wagon seat, and went back to shoveling the corn. I had thrown out all but the last few ears when from the dooryard there came a musical call. "Betty May!" Musical as the voice was, I recognized a note of authority in it, and so did Betty May. She rolled onto her stomach and started sliding off of the seat. I wouldn't risk having her down behind that Mustang's heels again, so caught her up and called, "She'll be right there." Then I picked up the reins with my free hand, clucked to the team, and turned it back toward the dooryard. As we passed the haystacks, I saw a slender, dark-haired woman walking toward the scales, a baby in her arms and a pretty little girl at her side. She didn't look to be more than a year or 2 older than I, though Bob was at least 35. But it was evident that she was his wife and thoroughly annoyed. When I pulled up at the scales, she was saying, "My Lord, any more it seems like every time I turn my back she's off to the barns or the feed lot, getting into mischief, and all you do is encourage her."
"Oh, now, Marguerite," Bob answered in a half-mocking tone. "No, I don't encourage her none."